Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming. So I just jotted down all of my social media handles and names, so if you want to hit me up on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. And the Murdock Study is the longitudinal population research study that I work for. I work for Duke. This is our main study. So you can find the Murdock Study on all social media platforms. And this is our website. So we would love to have you. This is my email address at Duke. If you have any questions or if I can help you in any way, please let me know. So thank you for that introduction, Margie. So it's a little bit of an interesting story how I went from journalism to Duke University working in basically PR, communications and marketing. But before I tell that, let me ask first, so who are students in here? You all, okay. And tell me your majors.
Integrated marketing communication, a minor in English.
Okay, integrated marketing communication. Interesting.
I'm a writing major.
Writing major.
Biology and psychology with a minor in environmental science.
Okay, very cool.
Mathematics major with a minor in secondary.
Okay, interesting, interesting. Well, welcome. And the rest of you are Catawba staff? Okay, great. Faculty, great, thank you. So, like Margie said, I was in journalism for years, and so much of, as you develop into your careers, is going to be connections that you've made along the way, right? So, I just want to advise you to keep close people and contacts and relationships. You never know when something's going to become valuable to you and it's going to help you along your career path as a writer or a scientist, so, or a mathematician. So I covered the research campus for 4 years when it was launched, and then went back to, and did that as a freelance writer, and then went back full-time to work at the Post covering City Hall and business for 4 years. And it was just about the time where journalism, is anybody going to be a journalist? Writers? Maybe? Okay. Go for it, but just be ready. It's hard. It's really hard. And I had kids, and I wasn't seeing my family. It's a very difficult work life if you have young children. And so I was coming to the point where it's becoming unsustainable for my family and me. And I started thinking, like, what institutions would I possibly be willing to work for? Like, I wasn't really willing to go to work for anybody. And academia was one. And I got a call from a woman who's actually my best friend, and she runs the Murdock Study in Kannapolis, and said, we finally have the money. We're hiring a writer, communication specialist. And it just became, I'm sorry, Forrest, I'm sorry. I walk, I pace.
I'm gonna man the camera.
I'll try to stay over here.
You're fine.
I'll try to keep my spot. So anyway, it became, my experience covering the research campus kind of catapulted me into this job where I didn't have a really steep learning curve, and I was able to kind of take off from the beginning of a pretty thorough understanding of this really complex and complicated institution. So if you're not familiar, let me just tell you, the research campus, the North Carolina Research Campus, is the brainchild and beneficiary of a billionaire, and I will remember that on video, a billionaire named David Murdock, who owns Dole Food. He lives in California. He's 92, and he owned the mill in Kannapolis in the 80s. He owned Cannon Mill, which was the largest producer of towels in the world and employed, I think, 16 or 17,000 people in its heyday. He owned the mill for 3 or 4 years, sold it. The mill eventually went bankrupt and was shuttered in 2003, which he's kind of still blamed for, and I'm not really clear why that is. He always maintained a presence in Kannapolis. He owns the downtown. He has a mansion in Enochville. And when the mill was shuttered, he bought it back at an auction in New York and held on to it for about a year. And then decided, after consulting with some folks in the UNC system, that he was going to bulldoze the mill and build a biotechnology hub. So we have the research campus. Has anybody been to Kannapolis to see the research campus? It's pretty amazing. It's worth a drive south on 85, take exit 63, turn left where it says, and then you will come upon it. And it's pretty amazing. So there are 8 universities there now that all focus on either human health, nutrition, or agriculture. And they all have writers. They all have marketing departments, they all have PR campaigns. Even people with a scientific background, if you end up going into writing someday, that's going to serve you really well with a math and science background. To be a technical writer or a science writer. Anyway, I encourage you to keep hold tight of those relationships and think about how things that you may not realize are going to have an importance or an impact in your life later could be valuable to you, because that's proved true for me. So journalism is probably my first love. To me, it's the dream job of a writer. It's the perfect job of a writer. And when my kids are out of the house, if newspapers still exist, as we know them today, I will likely go back. But Duke is a wonderful place to be, and the research campus is exciting and offers a lot of opportunities. So let me talk just really quickly. So what I did was put together 15 things that successful writers do. And the first one, your professors may applaud this, grammar and punctuation are important in every form of writing, all the time. You get one exception, texting your close friends and family. Other than that, social media, I don't care what it is, grammar and punctuation. So, commas can save lives. You've probably heard this, right? So, it's time to eat, comma, grandma. Without the comma, it's time to eat, grandma. So, use commas, use punctuation. If you don't know, look it up. I had a friend who was actually judging some writing that was going on, and the subject that all of the entries included was about tattoos. And if the entrant had misspelled the word tattoo, which has 3 T's, if they'd only included 2 T's, she threw it out. She didn't even go any further than that. So it's important, I think, to harken back to our days in elementary school. Point number 2, write what you know. So we've all heard this, right? Especially if you're going to be writing a novel or in fiction or an essay, write what you know. You know, think about your childhood, think about where you grew up. For me, that is true, but it's also just as true to say don't write what you don't know. Don't fake it. If you don't understand it, you are not going to be able to communicate it very well in written form. So make sure that you understand what you're writing, and that comes to point number 3, do your research. So as a journalist, there's really 2 parts to being a journalist. The first part is reporter, which to me is synonymous with research, and the second part is writing. People think of as a journalist as a writer, you're also a researcher. And if you haven't thoroughly reported and researched your topic, the writing is going to be a lot harder. And it's also not going to communicate as clearly and as well as if you've done your work on the front end. So research can be everything as extensive as spending years researching your dissertation or information for your novel, or it can be as simple as 3-second Google search to understand how to spell hors d'oeuvre. So take the time to do your research. Work on the front end is going to pay off on the back end. Point number 4. Writer's block is not an option. If you are a professional writer, if you are writing for your living, you don't get the luxury of saying, oh, I just can't write today. I just, I put it away. Sorry, you're being paid to write. So you have a job to do. Some options that I have when I'm stuck are go for a walk, talk to a friend, watch a cat video, drink water, and then sit back down and write. You just don't have the luxury of saying, I have a block. You just push through. And that may involve a lot of rewriting, a lot of editing, but get some words on the page. And then it will start to flow. You may need to come back and rewrite that. You may scrap everything that you wrote that morning, but get some words on the page. Number 5, remember that people are going to be afraid of you, right? So writing is a skill, and a lot of people don't have it, and they wish they did. I sat down recently with a woman, and I had done some research on her before. I was going to interview her for a news release I'm working on at work. She has a PhD. She has an MD. She has been tapped by Duke to lead a portion of a very important prostate cancer research study that we're going to be involved with. I was a little intimidated to talk to this woman, to be honest. And so we sat down, and she came in and was across from me, and I introduced myself, and I started, you know, with my introduction of myself and what I was doing. And she just came clean, and she said, "I'm so nervous." And I was like, what? Because you and me, people are afraid, and they are intimidated by writers. So keep that in mind. You can use it to your advantage, but it's also just helpful to realize that you need to kind of put people at ease. Especially if you're going to be interviewing people as a journalist or as a communication specialist, as a marketing or PR person, you need to put them at ease and let them know that you're not there to make fun of them, have a gotcha moment. Even as a reporter, you want to have an honest conversation with them and try to get their side of the story. And that's going to make a better product in the end. Number 6, make yourself invaluable. So we've already talked about how writing is a skill. Every organization needs and can use a good writer. I don't care what it is, whether it's a newspaper or a corporation or a mom and pop, every organization can use a good writer. So embrace all forms of writing, everything from news releases and newsletters to social media posts. I've even been asked multiple times at work to be the person that writes the card that's going to go on the funeral flowers, right? So all forms of writing, from the tweet to the white paper. Make yourself skilled. Learn how to do all these different forms of writing, and that's going to serve you really well. If you will become a communicator in addition to the written form, expand your expertise and your skill set. Take and edit photos. Take and edit video. You will make yourself invaluable to that organization if you can find and master multiple ways to communicate in addition to the written word. Talk to other writers, that's number 7. So I went from a newsroom full of writers and editors to being the only person in an office of 30 people who is the designated writer. And it was a lonely place. And I was working with my best friend and people I've known for years, but it was just a little bit lonely. So I really had to reach out to other writers. And I was in Kannapolis, I wasn't in Salisbury anymore. I had lost my kind of support group. So I had to find ways to reach out to other writers and be able to vent, brainstorm, ask questions, throw ideas around with. And so social media, awesome, great resource. And we have a group now, a private Facebook group. There are 5 of us. We all used to work at the Salisbury Post. 4 of us have left journalism. It's a tough, tough industry right now. Not to discourage you. I want you to be a reporter if that's what you want to do. And we'll talk about that more in a little bit. But reach out to other writers and support each other. Number 8, keep learning. Take advantage. Here you are in Catawba, awesome opportunities, this technical writing course that Dr. Starr was talking about. Find any opportunity that you can to learn, to grow your skill set. Practice writing. Different forms of writing. Branch out into forms of writing that you're not comfortable with, right? If you love to write fiction, force yourself to do technical writing. If you're not super familiar with all platforms of social media, get familiar with them. That's going to serve you really well in your careers if you pursue a communications or PR position. When you get into your job, you'll be amazed. A lot of employers will send you to webinars and workshops and pay for additional learning opportunities. Take advantage of all that to grow your skill set. Number 9, read. Read good writing. Read bad writing. Just read. Read as much as you can. Read whenever you can. Pick up a paper book. Read a paper book. It's an awesome experience, and we don't want to lose that in this age of screens and screen time. Number 10, edit, edit, edit. Edit yourself, and then have someone else edit you, and then rewrite it again. So nothing is perfect in the first draft, right? I mean, I edit my tweets. Like if I have a Facebook post and it doesn't say edit at the top, I didn't do my job, right? So some people are like embarrassed, like, oh, I have to edit edit your Facebook posts. Edit everything. Rewrite, reread, and edit. And that's going to serve you well also. And then have someone else. Even you've read it a million times, someone else is going to read it and catch something. Number 11, write in the active voice. Occasionally occasionally you are in a situation where you just have to use the passive voice, but by and large, you can find a way to turn that sentence around and use an active verb. And that is going to make a huge difference in your writing. Number 12, the 5 W's and an H. So super simple, right? We all learned that in probably middle school. I still use it every day. I still go back and read what I've written, or prepare for an interview, or do my research and think about the 5 W's and the H. I was preparing for an interview recently of a PhD, and her research that I had to understand and then translate for my readers, who the Murdock Study is largely people that don't have post-secondary education. I had to talk to her about a research titled Sensitivity, Specificity, and Operating Characteristics of the Computable Diabetes Phenotypes Against the Gold Standard of Clinical Judgment. So I was a little intimidated by that. How am I gonna do this interview? How am I gonna get the information that I need? I literally sat down on my laptop, I wrote the 5 W's, I wrote the H, and that was how the interview went. And it was so helpful, because suddenly I was like, let's just boil this down. What do we really need to know here in order to write something that people can understand? And that's what it is. So keep that in mind. Number 13, get the name of the dog. So my editor at the Salisbury Post passed on this advice to me from his own editor, who would yell this directive to reporters as they ran out the door to a fire. Get the name of the dog! And so, more than just the importance of finding out the name of the dog that perished in the fire, or hopefully survived the fire, to me, that refrain reminds me to focus on details when I'm writing. Ask the questions that are going to provide your readers, your audience, with an extra level of detail and insight. So, get the name of the dog became kind of a joke, right? We would say that to everybody as they were leaving for their event. But it was just a great reminder to think about your audience and what is going to help them understand this subject matter, as simple or as complex as it may be, in a new way. So make your writing stand out from others. Get the name of the dog. 14, develop a thick skin. So people love to kill the messenger, right? As a writer, that's us. We're the messenger. If they don't like the message, they're going to attack us. So as a journalist, this was extremely important to develop a thick skin. You had to handle a lot of ugly criticism. And initially it was hard for me. But as I went on in my career as a journalist, if I knew that I had done a good job and I had done my best and had done my work, including my research reporting before I started to write, it became much easier to me to let that criticism roll off my back, and also listen to it openly and honestly and see if there was any kind of a nugget of truth in there that I could use for self-improvement. And usually there wasn't, but sometimes there was. That was from the public. Of course, a criticism that comes from your editor, your boss, your supervisor, is a whole nother ballgame, and you have to be willing to listen and really take what they're saying as feedback and try to improve, which is often not easy to do. So if you're going to go into newspapers, the saying is, if you're not pissing someone off, you're doing it wrong. So if you're going into that line of work, you really just have to be prepared for that kind of criticism to come from the public. I will say, in my new role at Duke, I've been there for a year, it has been a pretty incredible stress relief to not be under that kind of criticism day in and day out. So just be prepared. I know you can handle it. Criticism usually really bothers me if I know in my heart that I haven't done my best work. So prepare yourself. Take the time that's necessary. Do the work ahead of time. Do your best work, and then you'll be able to defend it. Number 15. Do something other than write. So live a full life, and this is going to inspire your writing. Learn to cook. Learn to knit. Learn to brew beer. Whatever it is, find a passion and follow it. Get a dog. Get a cat. Spend time with friends and family. go outside, practice yoga, and I'm going to sound like your mom here. I have a sophomore in college. Get enough sleep, and eat well. You are what you eat. So those are my 15 things that successful writers do in my experience. And it's 11:30, and I would love to spend the rest of our time together answering questions, and that may spark some other discussion. Let me, I didn't thoroughly explain the Murdock Study. Before we do that, let me just say, so is anybody familiar with the Murdock Study? Has anybody heard of it? A little bit? Okay. So the Murdock Study, so our benefactor, David Murdock, who built the research campus, he also gave Duke $35 million in 2007. And when you give Duke $35 million, they will make an acronym out of your name, no matter how ridiculous it is. So the Murdock Study is the measurement to understand and reclassify disease of Cabarrus and Canapolis. Yeah. So luckily his name ends with K and not H, as the other Murdock does, because we fit Cabarrus and Canapolis in there very well. So we recruit adults living in Cabarrus County. You know, Canapolis straddles the line between Rowan and Cabarrus. I don't know if you're familiar. Canapolis is the second largest municipality in Rowan County. So if you live in Cabarrus County or Canapolis, or now China Grove, Orlandis, you can enroll in the Murdock Study. And the Murdock Study is a longitudinal health population research study, clinical research study that takes a small amount of blood, a small amount of urine from each participant in a health history form. You give blood and urine one time, you fill out your health follow-up form every year. And then our scientists and our collaborators basically mine your DNA to understand disease at the molecular level. So we have 12,000 participants. Their blood and urine have generated over 400,000 samples. Blood is stored in 11 different ways, which I had no idea until I started this job. We have a biobank, which is like a giant freezer, in Canapolis, and we have researchers now really across the world that are using these samples for experiments to try to understand diseases including cancer, diabetes, multiple sclerosis, Alzheimer's disease, severe acne, a variety of studies. We have 11 studies right now managed by Duke in Canapolis that started from the Murdock Study and are either considered a subset of the Murdock Study or might be completely different but are using the Murdock Study infrastructure, the 30 full-time employees who are there, the relationships that we have with doctors and doctors' offices, our samples, to conduct their own research. Much of the research is conducted in Canapolis at the David H. Murdock Research Institute, which when you go to the research campus is the big building with the dome, which is, well, there's two domes now, because the city of Canapolis has built City Hall, that's the little dome. The core lab is the big dome. So we have relationships with all of the universities there. It's a little bit of an interesting animal because, you know, typically universities are very competitive, not only on the sports field, but also in the lab. And the whole idea of the research campus is collaboration. And it has taken some work to pull those silos down. And we still have a couple of principal investigators, lead scientists, who would rather fight than play nice, but it's coming around. It's coming around. So we're there, and it's fascinating work, and it's impactful work, and I think it is going to serve a great need and a great purpose as we go. A longitudinal study means we follow the same person for years, decades, potentially their whole life, so we can see changes over time. They may eventually take more blood and urine from people. Right now it's the health history, which is the data, and researchers are just going crazy over the fact that we have 12,000 participants, most of whom fill out a follow-up form every year. And so when Granny has a heart attack at 83, they can look back at her samples and her previous health histories and try to understand kind of what was going on with her health that changed. Eventually, ultimately developing better diagnostics, better treatments, potentially cures for some of the chronic ailments of our time. So, now, tell me what you're thinking and what questions you have. And I'll move over here. Anybody have any questions about writing, about what I do?
want to lead off, but I will. This is a question kind of about work product. What are the longer or more formal kinds of documents you have to create? And so types of documents, or what do you all call them, or how do you think about them, and maybe who do you write those for?
Right. So my audience as the communication specialist is our participants. So my product, my work product, is news releases, newsletters, social media, email blasts. So I'm not writing the longer scientific documents. I'm often interpreting those and translating those into something that our participants can learn and read and even enjoy. So I'm often asked maybe to chime in or to help discern kind of the way forward on some of those other things, but I'm not writing the longer scientific documents. Does that answer your question?
That helps me get a clearer sense of it.
Right, right.
In terms of the newsletter, what else goes in that generally?
Well, the newsletter, it's interesting. We have two parts to the Murdock Study. We have retention and recruitment. And we have been really good at recruiting. We've recruited 12,000 people in about 6 years in a community that really had never heard of clinical research, where many people don't have post-secondary education. So we've done an awesome job. I say we, I'm new, right? But I'll take credit. So we've done an awesome job of recruitment, and now we really need to work on retention. So in keeping people engaged, encouraging them to fill out their follow-up form. So we've done things like highlighting participants in our newsletter, little biographies about them, interesting facts about them, why they're involved, why they fill out their follow-up form. We highlight our scientists so people can understand what's happening with their samples, right? We highlight some of the research that's going on. We just collaborated with Chapel Hill on a male fertility study. One of the researchers there discovered that men that lack a certain nutrient in their blood have sperm that's less mobile than other men. And so they used our samples to further this research in hopes of getting a big NIH grant and doing a massive study. So helping people understand, like, you know, you could help people have a baby someday by joining our study. So making it real, you know, I mean, translating that big long title that I read of that research, you know, so what does this mean for you? Basically what that researcher is doing is working on electronic health records and trying to understand how accurate they are, you know, and when people report to their doctor and what their doctor puts in their electronic health record, is that the same? So those kinds of efforts. So it's not always necessarily about disease. Sometimes it's about something like that. You know, how truthful are these records that we're creating, that all the physicians are sharing, and that we now have access to online. So that's kind of what the newsletter is. It's a way to keep people engaged, really, and keep them interested and keep them involved in the study. And a lot of times, in addition to writing, they're asking me for help with brainstorming, with events, with coming up with different branding materials, branding campaigns, that kind of thing. So I'm also involved in that a lot as well.
And do you do the production work top to bottom of the newsletter?
No, we don't. We don't. We actually contract that out with Duke. So Duke has a great communications department within the School of Medicine, and they do all of our production work. Yeah, it's really important for them, and therefore for me, that everything is branded properly. And so they like to keep their hands on that. Yeah, yeah, it's amazing, like the way the logo looks, the colors that you use, the space. I mean, I found that out quick.
I teach writing for media, so and I can say.
Tell me your name.
Mike Hogwood.
Okay.
And I'll just say amen in your 15 things. I'm gonna steal Emily Ford's 15. I think it's a good writing. It's great. I want to ask you though, because I teach a lot about grammar, punctuation, and how important that is. AP style.
Yes.
It's been around a long time.
Yeah.
Do you still use that when you're writing your?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's a little bit of headbutting because AP style is not scientific writing style.
Right, yes.
And so I've had to, we've had a little bit of a battle over that sometimes with some really smart scientists who then I have to say, well, I'm sending this to reporters.
Right.
I'm posting this on
Right.
our website, but yes, I follow AP style, not as closely as I did as a reporter, but fairly closely. For example, Murdock, the acronym Murdock is actually too long to be capitalized according to the AP style book.
Right.
The Charlotte Observer and I have had a little issue with that. I lost. Every newspaper that we're in, including the Wall Street Journal, will capitalize Murdock. The Charlotte Observer will not. So the style editor there and I did not see eye to eye on that.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I do follow AP style.
We have an integrated marketing communications
Yeah,
person
great.
here, which is great. This is relatively new at Catawba. And in the past, in most academic worlds, marketing is in the business school, public relations is in communications. And comment, if you would, in the real world where you work, don't those two, and there have to be a lot of synergy, work together?
I'm so glad you brought that up, and that is very, very forward thinking, what you have done with this integrated program, and I applaud you. Because, I'll give you an example. So we are working, it's not a secret anymore, we are working, Duke and Stanford are working with Google to plan and launch a massive longitudinal study called Baseline. And I've been involved on the marketing side and the communication side. And it was interesting how they set it up. They had a PR working group and they had a marketing working group. And I was the only person on both. And every time I was on the marketing call, they would say, oh, well, we need the PR people to provide us with this before we can move forward. And then I would get on the PR call, and they would say, oh, well, we need the we need the market. And it was like, well, hey, let's do it together. It was very interesting. And I thought, and I still am not 100% clear about why those two were separate. To me, it made a lot more sense to bring them under one.
Right.
Under one umbrella. And in fact, they did actually start, when I said, oh, hello, they did actually start having the lead in each instance on each other's call. So to me, it makes great sense to have the two under one roof, so to speak, because they are interconnected. And they are, you can't have one without the other, really, in my experience. I've only been doing this side of writing for a year, but I think that's an inspired decision to have them together. So, bravo.
Good.
Have you found it helpful to have it
Yeah, a lot of my
integrated?
classes interconnect, and there's a lot of ideas we just develop.
Great. Great.
Can you talk a little bit, Emily, about, so you said you don't work on writing the scientific studies. Do the PIs tend to write themselves, or are some of your employees actually writers, scientific writers?
For the most part, the PIs are extremely involved in every step. The PIs that I've come in contact with, now that may not be the rule, that may be the exception, but from my experience, they do have, and they're good writers. They're excellent writers. In fact, our PI, the Murdock Study, she's an excellent communicator. She's great on video. She's great in an interview. So I'm very, very lucky to have a PI with her skill set. But for the most part that I've experienced so far, yes, they're very involved in every step of the process, including the writing.
I only ask because a friend of mine who's on the medical faculty somewhere was hiring, she had a backlog of research that wasn't out yet, and so she was hiring a writer to write her stuff.
Okay.
And I just didn't know how common that was. She's a psychologist, but
And there may be some of that going on, certainly. You know, the research campus is such an odd bird compared to most academic institutions. You know, we're still relatively small, and the PIs there are just extremely involved in their work. And I think the largest staff there, I think the largest university there is Chapel Hill with maybe 80 people, maybe 100 people now. So still relatively small in a startup. But growing. There's, I think, more than 1,000 people now that work at the research campus when you include industry and administration and, you know, all the other folks. So it's certainly not where they expected it to be at this point because of the recession, but growing. And we've hired, I mean, since I've been with Duke, we've hired 6 people. So it's great.
So what does your typical day look like? Is there such a thing?
Oh yeah, so my typical day is so much less stressful than it used to be. So as a journalist, so I'll say as a journalist, you know, you work when the news is happening, right? So there were a lot of times when I had my days free, but then I would work from 4 to midnight. That was quite often for me, at least once a week, sometimes twice. Which is great if you're a night owl, which I am, but then not great if you have to get up at 6 to do carpool. So that was the issue. So as a communication specialist now, it's very 9 to 6, you know, 8 to 5, that kind of thing. I can work a lot from home if I want to. That particularly doesn't appeal to me. I mean, I like to be with people, and I feel especially as the communicator, the designated communicator in the office, you really need to be around people. And you can, it's so interesting to be at a meeting or even to be overhearing a meeting, and there'll be story ideas. They don't realize it's a story idea, you know, and you're like, oh, that would be a great story. And so then you can pick up on that and follow up with preparing a news release or even preparing an article for the newsletter if it's not really appropriate for the newspaper. So I kind of thrive on that. So a very, very typical day right now. Much different than a reporter. No weekends and no nights right now, so that's a good thing.
How important would you say in your writing, what you do now, is being a good interviewer? I spend a lot of time on that, about how to ask the appropriate questions to get and decide. To me, it helps your writing. I don't know, how do you feel about it?
Well, the biggest part of being a good interviewer is being a good listener. And really paying attention. This is why, okay, I also teach yoga. This is why yoga is so awesome. So if you all are thinking about yoga, please practice yoga. It teaches you to be in the moment and be present. You cannot hold some of these yoga postures if you are not present. You're going to fall over. You cannot conduct a good interview if you are not in the moment. If you're already thinking about your next 2 questions, or if you're worried about, what did I say? What did that come out weird? Forget about the past. Don't worry about the future. Be here now. Listen to what your subject is saying to you. That is going to inform your next question. Certainly come prepared. Have done your research. Have Googled your person. Have looked at their LinkedIn page. Have a list of questions ready. Maybe it's the 5 W's and the H. Those are your questions. Be prepared, but then be willing to let inspiration strike when you hear something come from them that was unexpected or personal. Maybe they're starting to open up a little bit personally, and you can kind of start to maneuver there. That's going to make a great story, a great essay, a great article, whatever it is that you're preparing. So I think interviewing is key. Interviewing is a huge part of the job of being a writer, and being a good listener is going to make you a good interviewer.
When you write, I'll have all these questions. When you write formal for a press release, and different from writing for a newspaper, that magical first sentence, it's just magic sometimes. And often, I tell writers that comes later. It comes after you write, but that first sentence is it important when you're writing more formal, press release, what you're doing to still get that magic in the first sentence?
Absolutely. Absolutely, because no editor is going to get past the lead if it doesn't grab them, right? So here's my lead in this story about Jimmy Hurley. So here's my lead. So this was the mayor signed a proclamation for Jimmy right before he died. And my lead was, perhaps no other person has touched more lives in Salisbury than Jim Hurley. So, I do think the lead is crucial. Whether, and that's whether you're writing a Facebook post or a news release, or I don't care what it is, that first sentence is gotta grab them. It really does. Sometimes I know it. I know it during the interview. And I'll star my notes and I'll say, this is it right here. Sometimes it comes later. I love to tie in the lead with the last graph. Throw a couple gems along the way, keep them going, give them the information they need, but throw a couple little nuggets in there, and then boom, hit them with your last graph to tie it back to the lead. So that's kind of a good way to think about it, right? Tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. A lot of people say that about writing. But the lead is crucial, absolutely. And judging contest pieces, entering contests, you're not going to get anywhere if you don't have a lead that grabs. You know, and a lot of times people will bury the lead, and that's often a good reason and a good excuse to have somebody else read it. And they're going to say, well, hey, this thing in paragraph number 5 is really interesting. You're like, oh, that's my lead. What's it doing down there? Get it up. Get it up to the top.
Listening to you talk about that, about, you would star in the notes what the lead might be, that seems like instinct, but I bet it came from a lot of hard work and practice as a writer. What can our students be doing now to get some of that practice as a writer?
Right.
Maybe inside of class, but especially outside of class.
Right all the time. I think I had to give one word that defined how I write, and I wrote constantly. Right. Practice writing. Just like you practice riding a bike when you're 5 years old, practice writing. And you're going to get better at it, right? And then go back and edit stuff that you wrote before, that you wrote last year, that you wrote last month. Rewrite it. Have somebody else read it. There is really huge value in a good editor. So I was blessed with an awesome editor at Salisbury Post, several of them. And so lean on those people when you find those people, And often, it might not be somebody you work for, it might not be a professor that you have, but it might be somebody that you have a former relationship with. And lots of times those people are going to want to encourage you and kind of bring you up in your writing. So write and find someone to edit your work.
Lori, last question.
You mentioned that you've been freelancing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was just curious, what advice do you have for people who are freelancing today with how varied the market is? And I just was reading an article the other night about the Huffington Post being under fire for wanting to, doing what a lot of websites are doing, where they publish you for exposure instead of pay. For writers who are trying to get experience, what are the best ways to go about freelancing in this day and age when it's hard to get paid for your work sometimes?
Right. So I will do my best to answer that question. I was very lucky in my freelance career because I already had a relationship with the Post.
Okay, so you were working freelancing for
I
the Post.
freelanced
Okay.
exclusively for the Post. So I was very, very, very lucky in that. But if you don't have a relationship with a publication and you're going to be freelancing, remember that you're selling yourself, right? So that means all of your social media platforms are 100% up to snuff, 100%. No grammatical errors, no spelling errors, everything is well written because people are going to look before they hire you, right? Make sure you have a professional headshot to include with your emails, your applications, whatever it is however you're corresponding with potential publications. And I would say network. I would say talk to people. Find other people who are freelancing. See what's working for them. Find out. People need writers. There is just like this desperate need for good writers. I've had probably 6 offers to freelance this year that I've turned down. So once you can get in and people know you as a freelancer and you've done good work, the offers will come. The offers will come. So getting your foot in the door I think is the hard part. And I'm sorry I don't have any advice there because I didn't have to do that. I was very lucky that way. But there is a need for good writers. People will search you out.